So in this question, we're going to calculate the weighted average cost of capital. Now, the reason why this one is a bit tricky is because they don't give us the weight of the debt, the common shares, and the preferred shares. We actually have to calculate that first and then apply the costs and then calculate the weighted average. So the first thing that I'm going to start off with is just trying to figure out the value of the debt. And in this question, I've already highlighted in yellow the information pertaining to the bonds. So we have a 10,000 bond with a face value of 1,000, and it has a 10% coupon rate. So that's the stated rate on the bond, and it matures in 8 years. And then down here, it says that it pays semi-annually, and it's trading at a market rate of 12%. So we can go ahead and calculate the present value of the bond. So I'll bring up my financial calculator, and we want to go down to present value. So the rate that we use here is the market or the yield rate, and that's the 12%. Now this does pay twice a year, so I'm just going to divide that by 2. So it'll be 6% every calculation. Now the NPER is the number of payments. So if it's an 8-year bond, we can multiply that by 2, and that will give us 16 payments. Now the payment is based off the future value, or the face value, and the face value is the 10,000 bonds multiplied by 1,000. So they're $1,000 each. So that comes out to 10 million. So then the payment is going to be the 10 million multiplied by the stated rate. And the stated rate on that was the 10%. Now we just have to remember that we pay that out twice a year, so we have to divide that by 2. So now the answer, the present value, is 898,9410.47. And I'll just round that to a whole number. So now that we have the value of the bond, we can go ahead and figure out the cost. So the cost is what we're going to use in order to put into our table for weighted average cost of capital. So I'm going to use this formula to calculate it. So it's going to be KD equals Y divided by 1 minus the flotation rate. So there's going to be a cost associated with issuing the bonds. So that's what the flotation rate means. And then multiply that by 1 minus the tax rate, because we want the cost to be after tax. So in this case, Y is the effective interest rate. So that's 12.36%. So that's the yield, divided by 1 minus the flotation rate is the 4%. And then 1 minus the tax rate is 1 minus, and the tax rate is 38%. So let's just see if I can actually get this formula in here properly. So 0.1236 divided by 1 minus 0.04 . Okay, and then I'll put all of that in brackets because I want that to be the answer. And then multiply that by 1 minus the tax rate. And let's just round this to a few decimal places here. Okay, so now I've got the amount of the bonds and I've got the cost of the bonds. So that's step 1. So now step 2, I'm going to work on the preferred shares. So I'll just probably work on this in a different color. So the preferred shares information, and I'll highlight this in a different color, is we have 100,000 preferred shares with a face value of $25, and it pays a 7.5% dividend. And the preferred shares are currently trading at $26.50. And if we issue any new shares, we'd have a flotation expense of 5%. So that's just the cost of issuing the shares. Okay, so the first step is just trying to find the market value of the preferred shares. So that one's not too bad, because all I have to do is take that $26.50. So it's the $26.50, and then just multiply that by the 100,000 shares. So $26.50 times by 100,000 shares. So the market value of my preferred shares is $2.65 million. And I'll just highlight this one in green. So now in order to find the cost, I'm going to use this formula. So the cost of preferred shares equals the dividend on the preferred share, divide that by the price minus the flotation cost. So in order to figure out what the dividend is, what we have to do is take the number of shares. So the actual book value of the share is 100,000 times 25. So that's the first thing that I should do, is take the 100,000 shares and times that by 25. So remember, that's the book value, and the dividend is off the book value, not the market value. So 100,000 times 25. So that gives me 2.5 million. And then the dividend is going to be 7.5%. So if I take 7.5% of that, that means my dividend is going to be 187,500. So the dividend equals the book value times 7.5%. So now I can put that 187,500 into here, 187,500. And now the price is the 2650000 minus the flotation cost. So then the flotation cost is going to be the price, 2650000, times whatever percentage they told us it was. So it says that the flotation expense is 5% of the price. So I'll do 5%. So the flotation cost ends up being 132,500. So now let's put the formula in here and see what that comes out to. So 187,500 divided by 2650000 minus 132,500. And we'll want to round this to 4 decimal places too. So the cost is 0.0745. So now I've got both the cost of the preferred shares and the cost of the bonds. I've got the value of the bonds and the value of the preferred shares. So now all I have to do is calculate the common shares. Okay, so I'm going to highlight in blue anything that has to do with the common shares. So it says that we have 600,000 common shares outstanding. We also have retained earnings of 4.5 million. Now, during the last 5 years, we've had a steady growth rate on the common dividends, and they grew from 0.8 to 1.23. So they were just recently paid. And the common shares are currently trading at $15, so that's the market rate. And if new shares were issued at 15, that would cost us 7% of the proceeds in order to do that. So now we have all the information to calculate our common shares. Okay, so the first step that we need to do is figure out what the market value of the common shares are. And so that one's not too difficult, because what we can do is take the number of shares that are issued and outstanding, which is 600,000, and then just multiply that by the market rate of the shares, which was, the common shares currently trade at $15. So we'll go ahead and do that. So the common shares are 9 million. And I'll just highlight that in blue. Calculating the cost, on the other hand, is a little tricky. So the formula that I'm going to do for this is use the dividend divided by the price plus the growth rate. So you'll notice that's the same formula from our previous chapter. And then we're going to divide that by 1 minus the flotation rate. Okay, so let's try and solve this. Okay, so I'm just going to give you the growth rate instead of showing you how to calculate it, only because I think it's beyond the scope of what I'm trying to show you. So let's just assume that the growth rate is 8.98%. So they don't tell us that specifically in the question, but we could calculate that. So just knowing that the growth rate is 8.98%, and if I just paid a dividend of 1.23, so the 1.23 is from up here. Then my new dividend would be 1.23 times the growth rate, so 1.0898. So let's just see what that new dividend is. 1.23 times 1.0898. So my new dividend is 1.34. So I'll put that into the formula. Now I have rounding in here because it's just all the decimal places are hidden. And then if I divide that by the price, so just remember this is the book price. So the price is $15. And I shouldn't have said the book price. The PO means the market price. So that's $15. So then I add the growth rate. So 0.0898. So that's the top part. And then the bottom part is 1 minus the cost. So the flotation, I believe in this question was, here it is, 7%. So I'll just move over here and I'll try and do the math on this. So if I take the 1.34, divide that by 15, and then add my growth rate, which is 0.0898, I get this number on the top, and I'll just do it to 4 decimal places. And then on the bottom, I'll do 1 minus the flotation rate. So that's 0.093. So if I take 0.01792 and divide that by 0.093, we'll take this to 4 decimal places as well. That will give me 1926, so 0.1926. So now we have all of the components to put together our weighted average cost of capital. Whew, that was hard. Okay, so I like to put this into a chart. So we have our debt, our preferred, and our common shares, or our equity. So normally they'll give us the weights, but we had to calculate them in this case. So I'm going to grab my debt, which was the value of the bonds, and that's 8989410. I'm going to grab my preferred, and that's the 2650000, and I'm going to grab my common shares. So that's 9 million. So if we add all those together, that ends up being 20639,410. So if I weight that, and I'll just say this is market value. If I weight that, so this is how we get the weightings. We can do 8989410, divide that by 20639,410. And that gives me 44%. Or you can even see it rounding as well. If I do 2650000 and divide that by 20639,410, that gives me 12.84%. And if you take 9 million and divide that by 20639,410, that gives me 43.61%. So if I add all those together, it has to equal 100%, which it does. So now that I have my weight, I can factor in my cost. So just remember that we're going to multiply the weight by the cost in order to get the weighted average. So I'll bring in my cost. So the cost on the debt, we calculated to be 0.07983. And I'll show those to 4 decimal places again. The cost on the preferred shares was 0.0745. And then the cost on the common shares was 0.1926. Now these won't equal 100%. Remember, we calculated them by using these formulas. So now when I calculate the weighted average cost of capital, we're going to do 43.55% times the 0.0798. We'll do these to 4 decimal places. I take 12.84% and multiply that by 0.0745. And then I take the 43.61% and I multiply that by 0.1926. So now when I add these up, I get 0.1283. And I'll just want to show this as a percentage. Okay, so just to remind you, the weighted average cost of capital is the average cost of the debt and equity. So that's the average cost of financing all of its assets. So if I'm going to accept a capital project, which we'll be doing in subsequent chapters, we need to make sure that we get a return higher than the 12.83%.